I worked part-time in a taxi while I was studying at university. At the same time, my girlfriend, whom I had been dating for about a month, confessed to me that she had another man from Germany. She told me all about their relationship and admitted that she was planning to move in with him soon. Then, of course, we went our separate ways. Several months pass. I pick up a drunk couple near the bar. They sit in the back and start kissing. I understand that the dude speaks German. We drive to the girl's house, she gets off. Then the German says that now we are going to him. On the way, he starts telling me that he recently moved in with a friend and finally waited until she left for the weekend to cheat on her. Then he added that American women are very greedy for guys with accents, and that his girlfriend doesn't even know how often he messes with other girls. As you might have guessed, it was the same guy. I drove him to Carrie's house without saying a word. I wonder how they're doing now. I work at Lyft. One day at 11 p.m., an order arrives to take 4 passengers from Boston to a casino in Rhode Island. It was at least an hour's drive, but I agreed anyway. I arrive at the place, I am greeted by 4 middle-aged Asians, and they explain to me in broken English how best to go. And now, the weird part. While we were driving, they said only one word the whole trip: caramel. I'm not kidding, grown men were sitting in my car and saying the word caramel in a circle. At the same time, it wasn't some kind of joke. They weren't laughing. There was no reaction, just caramel. They whispered caramel, or sang in different tones, sometimes in unison. Sometimes they paused for 10 minutes and were silent. Dude, that was weird. When we arrived, they suggested that I wait for them for a while and go back. I'm gone. The strangest shit. It's night outside. I missed the last bus and called a taxi. As soon as I explained to the driver where to go, his phone immediately starts ringing. He apologized and closed the partition between us so I couldn't hear him. But something must have gone wrong, because I could hear him very clearly. And I perfectly heard him whisper, "I'll take a kilo. I'll be there in 20 minutes." Then he lowered the partition, apologized again, and, as if nothing had happened, began asking me about the recent football match. Such a cute driver. Updated. To clarify, it was in South Florida, so there's a huge chance he was talking about coconut. Updated 2. Again, the person was normal. I even gave him a $10 bill for finding a slice that saved us 15 minutes. I work as a taxi driver. I'm currently waiting for an order and writing this post. About a year and a half ago, several guys sat down near the campus and asked me to take them to the city, which was 40 minutes away. Cooking was going to be decent. As we drove, it became very clear that the dudes had stopped by the campus to sell coconut near the club. They often switch to Spanish, which I partially understand. And if I got it right, then they managed to drive about half a kilo. When they were paying me off, I burned down that they had hefty dough cutlets. The funniest moment of the whole trip was when their eldest started pushing around and demanded to stop by for some soda. As it seems to me, he was under his own product. Fortunately, I had a closed can of energy at hand. He drank it and left me with almost a 100% tip. It was one of the most profitable trips of all time. I work at Uber as a part-time job, mostly at night. I always start my shift in the party area near the university. Here are my favorite passengers for you. A 20-year-old girl who repeated one word all the way: pancakes. And she did it so abruptly, pancakes. Her slightly less drunk friends were sitting next to her and apologizing for their friend. The couple who sat in the back and did all sorts of dirty things. I think it was love for one evening. My only request was not to make a mess of the back. They listened to me. An Asian man under 50 whom I hooked up with in a Korean neighborhood. He tried to convince me all the way that a woman should be given kick for prevention so that she would obey. Of course, I wanted to tell him what a moron he was, but I was too tired at the time and knew that I would end up throwing him out of the car. In general, no matter how interesting the overheard conversations are, the most interesting trips are when lonely passengers chat with you as with an advisor. For me, Uber is like a bar, but without the hangover. Most of my passengers are very cool guys. I'm often invited to parties. I'll probably go to one of them one day. I was finishing the night shift. I took my last passenger to MSP, Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. I'm just driving away when I see a guy about my age sitting by the curb crying. I try not to stop at such moments because I know that a traffic jam will immediately form behind me. But something was obviously wrong with him, so I decided to slow down anyway and find out what happened. I jumped out of the car and asked if he was okay. The dude somehow regained his strength and, choking through tears, began to explain his situation to me. He needed to get to Duluth, Minnesota, 2.5 hours away, but none of the taxi drivers wanted to pick him up because it was already too late. At that moment, I was just struggling with terrible depression, which was like an endless war that I couldn't win, and I felt a strong empathy for him. All he needed was a little help. I showed him my driver's app on my phone, pointed to the Uber sticker on my car, and offered to give him a ride just like that without any meters or fees. He agreed, packed up, and we drove to Duluth. We didn't talk. It wasn't necessary. After about an hour on the road, he came to his senses and asked me to call. I agreed. I overheard from his conversation that he had lost everything. His wife and children recently died in a car accident. He lost his job. He lost his house. And he had to go to Duluth to see his father, who was dying. When we got there, he tried to shove some money at me, but I didn't take it. I was amazed by the fact that he offered me the last thing he had, a few crumpled bills and pennies wrapped in sandwich wrappers. He was obviously very grateful, even though he had lost everything. I was glad to take the weight off his shoulders. We drove for 2.5 hours and didn't say a word to each other. It was nice to know that someone might still need me. When I got home, I woke my mom up and hugged her. I want to tell you about what one of my passengers did. The kid was about 14 to 15 years old. It looks like it's normal. He was one of my first clients at Uber. So we rode with him for a few miles. The trip was scheduled for $15. But shortly before arriving, he texted his buddy to log into his Uber account and cancel the trip from his phone. Uber has a bug that if the trip has already started, then you can't cancel it from your device, but from another one, no problem. Well, then I drove him, swipe trip completed, and see that I received $0 for the order. That little shit. Fortunately, everything ended up fine in the end. I dialed Uber support, explained what had happened, and returned my money, but anyway, what kind of asshole is that? My taxi driver friend once got $500 for letting a passenger shit right in his car. Passenger, we're driving nonstop. $500 if you let me do it. I promise that nothing will get into the salon. We have two options. Either he was in a hurry, or he planned everything in advance because it was strange that he had $500 in cash. My buddy agreed. The dude did his business in the newspaper and threw everything out the window. A friend received $500. He also had a story about taking a guy with a heart attack to the hospital. Think about it. This idiot called a taxi instead of an ambulance. That sounds like a lot of crap to me. You can't frame unsuspecting taxi drivers like that.